about three trees standing on a hilltop, dreaming of what they wanted to become. Some day, when they grow up, they had dreams to share. Let's find out about their dreams and hopes that they shared together. Once upon a mountaintop, three little trees stood and dreamed of what they wanted to become when they grew up. The first little tree looked up at the stars, twinkling like diamonds above him, and said, "I want to hold a treasure. In fact, I want to be covered with gold and filled with precious stones. I then will be the most beautiful treasure chest in the whole entire world." The second little tree looked out at the small stream trickling by on its way to the ocean. "I want to be a strong sailing ship," he said. "I want to travel mighty waters and carry powerful kings. I will be the strongest ship in the world." Well, the third little tree just looked down in the valley below, where busy men and busy women worked in a very busy town, and said, "I don't want to leave this mountaintop at all. I just want to grow up so tall that when people stop to look at me, they will raise their eyes to heaven and think of God. I then will be the tallest tree in the whole world." Years passed, the rains came, the sun shone, and the little trees grew tall. One day, three woodcutters climbed up the mountain. The first woodcutter looked at the first tree and said, "This tree is beautiful. It's perfect for me." And with a swoop of his shining axe, the first tree fell. "Now I can be made into a beautiful chest," thought the first tree. "I shall hold a wonderful treasure." Well, the woodcutter looked at the second tree and said, "This tree is strong. It is perfect for me." And with a swoop of his shining axe, the second tree fell. "Now I'll sail mighty waters," thought the second tree. "I shall be the strongest ship, fit for kings." Well, the third tree felt her heart sink when that last woodcutter looked her way. She stood up so straight and tall and pointed bravely to heaven. But the woodcutter never even looked up. "Any kind of tree will do for me," he muttered. With a swoop of his shining axe, the third tree fell. The first tree rejoiced when the woodcutter brought him to a carpenter's shop. But the busy carpenter was not thinking about treasure chests that day. Instead, his work-worn hands fashioned the tree into a feed box for animals. The once beautiful tree was not covered with gold or filled with treasure. He was coated with sawdust and filled with hay for hungry animals. Well, the second tree smiled when the woodcutter took him to a shipyard. But no mighty sailing ships were being made that day. Instead, the once strong tree was sawed and hammered into a simple fishing boat, too small and too weak to sail on an ocean or even a river. He was taken to a little lake, and every day he brought in loads of dead, smelly fish. Well, the third tree When the woodcutter cut her into strong beams and left her in a lumber yard, she was so confused. What happened? The once tall tree wondered. All I ever wanted to do was to stay on the mountaintop and point to God. Many, many days and nights passed. The three trees nearly forgot their dreams. But one night, golden starlight poured over the first tree as a young woman placed her newborn baby in the feed box. Oh, I wish I could make a cradle for him, her husband whispered to her. The mother squeezed his hand and smiled as the starlight shone on the smooth and sturdy wood. This manger is beautiful, she said. And suddenly the first tree knew that he was holding the greatest treasure in the whole world. One evening, a very tired traveler and his friends crowded into the old fishing boat. The traveler fell asleep as the second tree quietly sailed out into the lake. Soon a thundering and thrashing storm arose. The little tree shuddered. He knew he did not have the strength to carry so many passengers safely through the wind and the storm. The tired man awakened. He stood up, stretched out his hand, and said, "Peace." Then the storm stopped as quickly as it begun, and suddenly the second tree knew that he was carrying the King of Heaven and Earth. One Friday morning, the third tree was startled when her beams were yanked from the forgotten woodpile. She flinched as she was carried through an angry, jeering crowd. She shuddered when soldiers nailed a man's hands to her. She felt ugly, harsh, and cruel. But on Sunday morning, when the sun rose and the earth trembled with joy, then the third tree knew that God's love had changed everything. It had made the first tree beautiful. It had made the second tree strong. And every time people thought of the third tree, they would think of God. And that certainly was so much better than being the tallest tree in the whole wide world. The end. Thank you so much for joining me for my Easter story. You know, whenever I